a cheap diorama for our Spitfire. How to turn this into something like this. A cheap diorama. Hi, welcome back to St Blazey Model World. So, just because our diorama is small doesn't mean it has to be boring. So I've used some polyfiller just to build up a couple of areas. And the arrow indicates the direction from which the diorama will be viewed. So we'll stand here and view forward. I built up opposite corners of the diorama because my taxiway for my airfield is going to run right to left along here. And we'll see as we go along how it all builds up. I've described this as a cheap diorama because it's being built purely from things and pieces, bits and pieces that I have left over from other projects. So one of the things that I found when I was rummaging through my box of bits is a polyfiller rock formation that I made for a model railway. And this piece wasn't used actually, but most of it was. So I'm probably going to just glue that there, something like that. And we're starting to build up a three-dimensional image, which is what we want. So we'll just wait now for the rest of this polyfiller to dry. I'll glue that rock into place and then we'll get right back to you. Okay, so now we've got our basic landform set up and dry. And it's now time to apply some more scenic scatter. And again, I keep emphasising through this video, this is advertised as a diorama on the cheap because we're using stuff that we've got lying about. If you're building any kind of model, keep what you have left over. Don't throw stuff away. You never know when it will come in handy. So now we're going to apply some PVA glue and a layer of scatter. Okay, so there's our layer of neat PVA glue applied for what is going to be our tarmac taxiway in this diorama. Is it realistic? I've absolutely no idea. We're not making a real airfield, are we? We're not replicating a specific place or a specific time. We just want a nice airfield diorama for our Spitfire kit to sit on. So now for the scatter, and for this I'm going to use sand actually, natural sand, real sand. Luckily for me, I live in Cornwall near the coast. We got tons of the stuff, and we'll just let this bag with a hole in it just run over here and we'll complete this process. You could use a sieve, you could just scatter it out of a jar. There are all sorts of ways to do it, but we're going to get this sand all over the PVA, get ourselves a nice covering, and then we're going to look at how we turn whatever we're left with into a taxiway. We'll be right back. Okay, so that's our scattering of sand applied, and of course that's got to dry, and there'll be a large amount of excess, and the excess will be recovered, and that'll go to some other project. We don't know what project yet, we haven't got that far, but as always, eye on supply and the economy, and anything that we can use that's basically free of charge or low cost, why not? So we'll wait for that to dry and then we'll turn this into our taxiway. Well, with the last of the fading light today, we'll come outside for this very last piece, and here we are now with our taxiway glued into place. Of course it looks like sand, and that's because it is sand, and the white patches that you can see here and here are just where the PVA hasn't quite dried yet. So now it's time to apply some black just to get some colour into this that's a bit more realistic. So here at St Blazey Model World, we don't buy the pre-made sort of washes, colour washes. We simply, when we get to the end of our paint, we just add a little bit of thinners if it's an enamel based paint, or a water, as in this case for our acrylic based paint. This is black, and this is going to form our basis for our taxiway, our tarmac. So we'll apply that now. So now our tarmac has dried, our taxiway, and as usual I've left variations in colour where I applied the black wash and variations for texture, and most noticeable is this patch here. Is that realistic? Well, again, I don't really know, but it's variation, and with a diorama we need points of focus, points of interest, something to look at that grabs our eye. The next stage will be to apply some colour washing to our small rock formation. So my rock formations always start the same way. There's the colour code XF15. This is another one of the Tamiya acrylic paints, and again it's a paint that was almost run out, and just before it got to that point I added a load of water, so it's very heavily diluted, and I'm just going to use a brush and just apply it to our rock formation here. And all I'm going to do is just dribble some on and let it find its own way down to the baseboard. And I'm really not too concerned at this stage with detail or anything else, because all of that sort of stuff is going to come in when we start to apply the last few pieces of our scenics. So I'll just put some on here, and it's really very random. I'm not worrying too much about it at this stage, because what's going to go on top is grey and black, just to give it the final finish. So I think that's enough. So now the next stage, another Tamiya XF1 black, again heavily diluted with water, and our flesh colour that we've just applied hasn't dried yet. This is going straight on top. And once again, I'm really not that concerned about how it lands, how it falls, whether it might look realistic or not, because the final detail will come with the finishing touches, and that's often the way in modelling. It's only when you put the last few pieces on that things really come together. So if you're a railway modeller, modelling a terminus station, for example, it might be when you put on the telephone boxes and the post boxes right at the very end that it starts to take shape. So this big piece of rock now is taking on a bit of colour, and I think that's it with that stage. I'll just blend in a bit of this flesh colour just to dilute it down a little bit. So we've got the flesh colour and our black wash, and we've also got some highlighted areas here, and just a little bit down here as well, and round there. That's fine, I can live with that. So now our rock formation is dry. The next stage is to seal our grassland formation on both sides of the diorama, and for that I turn to Mod Podge. This is matte Mod Podge. Now if you don't have any Mod Podge, please don't go and buy any specially. If you're not a modeller that's going to use Mod Podge all the time, don't buy it. Save your money. Spend the money on something else that you will use all the time. PVA will do just as well. So I've got a tatty old paintbrush here. It's seen better days, but it's good enough for this job. So let's apply our Mod Podge. So that's our Mod Podge on. We'll just wait for that to dry. It'll take a little bit of time. After we've done this, we're going to apply some grass, some scenic scatter, just to give our diorama a new colour, new dimension. If however you're not applying Mod Podge because you don't have any, then you'll be at the PVA stage. So just to prove that this works either way, this area here is going to get some grass scatter on it right now while the Mod Podge is still wet, and then further back in the bigger area I'll let that dry with the Mod Podge, and then we'll apply some PVA and put some grass scatter onto that. So let's work our magic now with the grass scatter. And again, I'm not too worried. You know, any waste will be recovered and used in a future project. Not a problem. So we'll just get this on now. It's getting a bit stuck in the jar. This is a new jar, so it's a little bit over full. Doesn't help it flow very well, but there we go. We'll get it out there now. Quick shake. And as I say, again, we've got a little bit of excess. No big deal, that'll get recovered. So our layer of Mod Podge has dried, and so has the grass scenic scatter. Over on the other side of the diorama, we've applied some PVA glue, and now we'll put on some grass scatter onto that. So there we are, and again now we'll wait for this to dry. Excess will be recovered, and we'll use that in another project. So now all our grass has dried, and I've applied one or two more finishing touches. A few small bushes and a tree, just one. And the tree and the grass really was a bit too one colour, one tone for my liking. So they've all been given a burst spray with some rail match sleeper grime. And that's just toned them down a little bit, particularly the tree. And it looks quite pleasing. I've put a thin, very thin dust coat of rail match sleeper grime over my tarmac area as well, and it's all coming to life very well. Just the last couple of finishing touches, and I've applied some brown poster paint just round the edge, just to hide the wood, and I found a small offcut of a railway back scene. It's not going to be used, so that went in as well. So there it is, our cheap diorama made up entirely of leftover pieces from our model box, and I think it looks okay. What did we spend? Well, it's hard to tell. The piece of wood was left over, might be worth 50p on a good day. I've used a tree. I don't know what that would have cost, 80p, a pound, let's call it a pound. Bit of scatter, probably 20 pence worth, 20 pence worth of PVA, probably 20 pence worth of Mod Podge, and an offcut from a railway backdrop that was never going to be used. So, probably tops £3. Not bad. Lastly, of course, we'll add our Spitfire, and you'll remember this model from a previous video. I bought it at a charity shop, sort of almost completely built, bits missing, cost £1. So add that to the £3 roughly that the diorama has cost, and we got ourselves a lovely little model scene. But our quick, cheap and easy diorama has other uses, and with a bit of imagination, it's up to us what we use it for. So it could just as easily be used to display this model bus. So that's it for this video. I do hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful and helpful. Please remember to like and subscribe, and by all means leave comments. We'll see you next time on St Blazey Model World.